Never Finished by David Goggins is not built to comfort the reader. It is built to confront the reader. From the beginning, the book presents itself not as soft encouragement and not as a set of easy habits for a better life, but as a wake-up call. Its message is that most people do not actually know what they are capable of because they stop long before they ever meet their real limits. They confuse discomfort with danger, fatigue with failure, and struggle with a sign that something has gone wrong. Goggins wants to reverse that interpretation. He wants the reader to see friction, resistance, pain, and challenge as the very place where growth begins. This book is a continuation of the philosophy he introduced earlier in his work, but here the theme becomes even more direct. Transformation is not a single event. It is not a breakthrough moment after which life becomes simple and confidence becomes automatic. It is an endless process of testing, rebuilding, and pushing beyond the version of yourself that would prefer ease. The title itself tells the story. Never finished. Never complete. Never entitled to coast on yesterday's victories. In Goggins's world, the person you were yesterday cannot carry you forever. The standards that once stretched you can become the standards that now keep you small. And the work of becoming stronger is not about dramatic moments alone. It is about what happens in private, in repetition, and under pressure. This is why the book feels less like motivation and more like a challenge issued directly to the listener. It asks a set of uncomfortable questions. What are you avoiding? Where have you started lying to yourself? What difficulties have you been treating as unfair simply because they require more from you than you wanted to give? And what would happen if, instead of escaping the hard parts of your life, you used them to remake yourself? That is the emotional and philosophical doorway into this book. It is not promising comfort. It is offering confrontation in service of freedom. The subtitle of Never Finished is Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within, and that phrase captures the core premise of the book. For Goggins, the decisive struggle in life is internal. External obstacles matter, of course. Circumstances matter. History matters. Pain matters. But the most important battle is the one that takes place inside the mind, where excuses are formed, fear gains language, and comfort tries to become a philosophy. He argues that most people are not simply held back by conditions. They are held back by the stories they repeat to themselves about those conditions. Stories about why they cannot begin yet. Stories about why the effort is not worth it. Stories about how they are simply not built for more. Stories about how the past has already determined the future. Goggins wants to interrupt that cycle. He insists that the mind is trainable, but only if it is placed under real demand. And that means this war within is not won through wishing, not won through vague positivity, and not won through inspiration alone. It is won through repeated acts of discipline that force the mind to face evidence it cannot deny. When you continue after the voice in your head says stop, you gather evidence. When you return after failure instead of withdrawing into shame, you gather evidence. When you stay with the difficult conversation, the hard workout, the lonely season, the unfinished project, or the painful healing process, you gather evidence. The war within is really a war over identity. Are you the person your fears describe, or are you the person your actions reveal? That question runs beneath almost every lesson in the book. Goggins does not believe identity is mostly discovered. He believes identity is forged. And it is forged most clearly in moments where there is a clash between what would feel good now and what would make you stronger later. This is where the book becomes powerful for a broad audience. The war within does not only belong to athletes or soldiers or people doing extreme things. It belongs to anyone trying to build consistency, courage, self-respect, or resilience. It belongs to the student who keeps procrastinating and hates it. It belongs to the parent who feels exhausted and is trying to keep showing up with discipline. It belongs to the worker who knows they have more in them but keeps shrinking into routine. It belongs to the person trying to heal, to rebuild, to focus, to become less reactive, less fragile, less defined by old pain. Goggins's claim is that the battlefield may look different for each person, but the principles are the same. The mind must be challenged, or it will settle for less than it is capable of becoming. One of the most memorable ideas in Never Finished is the concept of the mental lab. Goggins uses this idea to describe an internal space where the real work of self-construction happens. The mental lab is not a place of fantasy. It is not where you imagine the life you want while avoiding the cost of building it. It is where you observe yourself honestly, test your assumptions, and challenge your own limits. In that sense, it is both brutal and deeply practical. In the mental lab, the first task is honesty. Not flattering honesty. Not selective honesty. Not the kind that tells the truth about your strengths, but keeps your weaknesses hidden behind explanations. Goggins wants a more disciplined self-examination than that. He wants the reader to notice the habits of avoidance, the emotional patterns that lead to quitting, the ways resentment or fear dress themselves up as reason. He wants you to notice how often you negotiate downward with your own standards. How often you tell yourself tomorrow will be better while doing nothing that would make tomorrow different. How often you confuse intention with action and hope with preparation. This is why the mental lab is such a strong image. A lab is a place of experimentation, of repeated testing of evidence. It is not enough to say you want to become tougher, calmer, more disciplined, more focused, more capable. The question is what systems, stresses, and repetitions will produce that result. Goggins approaches personal growth almost like a scientist of pain and adaptation. Try something hard. See what breaks. Notice what the mind says. Learn where your standards collapse. Then return with more awareness and a stronger commitment. Over time, this changes the way a person relates to challenge. Instead of thinking, this is too hard, the mindset becomes, this is revealing something important. Instead of thinking, I failed, therefore I am weak, the mindset becomes, now I know where the weakness is and I can go to work on it. The mental lab transforms difficulty from an insult into information. And that is one of the book's most useful lessons. Growth is not prevented by discovering weakness. Growth begins there. The real danger is refusing to study yourself clearly enough to see where the work is needed. In a culture that often encourages self-protection and quick reassurance, Goggins offers a different model. He suggests that peace does not come from protecting your ego. It comes from building a self you do not need to make excuses for. A major theme in Never Finished is that suffering can educate a person in ways comfort cannot. This is one of the ideas that makes Goggins distinctive and also one of the reasons his work can be polarizing. He does not argue that suffering is pleasant or automatically noble. He argues that suffering, when entered consciously and endured with purpose, becomes a powerful instructor. Why? Because suffering strips away illusion. It shows you who you are when the performance ends. Many people can feel disciplined when conditions are easy. Many people can act courageous when the stakes are low. Many people can appear confident when they are praised. But suffering introduces a different test. It asks what remains when approval disappears, when the body is tired, when the schedule gets heavy, when doubt gets loud, when the reward is delayed, when life does not cooperate. Goggins sees these moments not as interruptions to the journey, but as the journey itself. The person formed only in comfort will remain limited by comfort. The person who learns how to function, think, and choose inside struggle develops a different kind of strength. This does not mean every struggle should be glorified. The deeper point is that challenge expands capacity when it is faced rather than avoided. We can translate this into everyday life. Suffering, in Goggins's broader sense, includes boredom, frustration, repetition, uncertainty, embarrassment, effort, and the sting of being confronted with your own inconsistency. It includes doing the thing you said you would do when you no longer feel like doing it. It includes training when no one is watching, apologizing when your pride wants to hide, starting again after a humiliating setback, and staying present in discomfort without turning immediately toward distraction. The lesson here is not that you should chase misery for its own sake. It is that your mind becomes stronger when it stops treating discomfort like an emergency. Once that shift begins, difficulty no longer has the same power to intimidate you. You begin to understand that pain is not always a command to stop. Sometimes it is proof that you are finally entering territory where growth is possible. This is a difficult lesson, but it is one of the central pillars of the book. The life you want may require becoming a person who can carry more than your current self can comfortably bear. Another essential lesson in Never Finished is the difference between borrowed confidence and earned confidence. Borrowed confidence is fragile. It depends on mood, praise, ideal conditions, and the hope that things will go well. It sounds good, but it cracks quickly under pressure. Earned confidence is different. It is built from memory. It comes from having done hard things repeatedly enough that your mind no longer needs fantasy to believe in your strength. Goggins' message here is especially important because many people try to build self-belief only through thought. They want to feel more confident before they act. But the sequence is usually reversed. You act first. You endure first. You prove something to yourself first. Then confidence grows from evidence. This is one of the reasons his philosophy puts such heavy emphasis on action. Every difficult task completed becomes a deposit. Every return after failure becomes a deposit. Every time you resist the easier path and follow your standard instead, you add to an internal account of proof. Over time, that proof changes how you see yourself. You become less dependent on motivation because you trust your own ability to continue without it. You become less shattered by setbacks because you have already survived enough struggle to know a hard moment is not the same thing as the end. And you become less interested in looking strong because you are increasingly focused on becoming strong. That distinction matters. Looking strong is social. Becoming strong is personal. Looking strong often seeks applause. Becoming strong often happens in silence. Looking strong depends on image. Becoming strong depends on repeated, often invisible, acts of discipline. Goggins keeps bringing the reader back to that idea. The strongest foundation for confidence is not positive self-description. It is a body of evidence created by disciplined behavior. The practical implication is straightforward. If you want more confidence, do not start by asking what words you should say to yourself. Start by asking what actions your future confidence would be built upon. Then begin doing those actions before you feel fully ready. Never Finished is also a book about identity, but not in the soft or fashionable sense of identity as self-expression alone. Goggins is interested in identity as a set of standards lived repeatedly under pressure. Who are you when no one is clapping? Who are you when the work is tedious, when the novelty is gone, when the praise has moved elsewhere, when the old pain returns, when your body is tired, when the temptation to lower the bar appears completely reasonable? In his framework, identity is not revealed by what you say you value. It is revealed by what you repeatedly do. This is why standards matter so much in the book. A standard is what remains when emotion changes. It is what guides action when mood is unreliable. Goggins pushes against the fantasy that past success guarantees future discipline. He refuses the idea that one breakthrough earns a permanent rest. That is the meaning behind the title. You are never finished because there is always a temptation to soften. There is always a new excuse available. There is always a chance to become impressed with your former self and begin living off an old reputation. He treats that as a danger. Once a person begins coasting, they start to drift away from the part of themselves that was built through struggle. They may still look accomplished on the surface, but internally they are shrinking. This is a challenging idea, especially in a culture that celebrates arrival. We are often taught to think in terms of reaching a destination and then enjoying the reward. Goggins does not deny the value of achievement, but he warns against letting achievement become permission to stop evolving. He would rather ask, who are you becoming through the way you pursue this life? Are your standards improving? Are you becoming more honest, more disciplined, more courageous, more capable of enduring pressure without collapse? If not, then external success alone is not enough. The practical lesson here is that personal growth must be maintained by ritual, not by memory. Yesterday's discipline does not substitute for today's effort. Yesterday's suffering does not automatically immunize you against today's weakness. Every new season asks the question again. What standard are you living by now? And are you still strong enough to face the truth about where you are falling short? One of the most constructive aspects of Goggins's philosophy is the way he frames setbacks. In Never Finished, failure is not treated as a final verdict on identity. It is treated as information. That does not mean it feels easy. Failure can be humiliating. It can expose weaknesses you hoped were gone. It can make you question your progress and your self-image. But Goggins argues that failure becomes destructive mainly when it is filtered through ego. If your main priority is protecting the image you have of yourself, then every setback feels unbearable. You either deny it, explain it away, or let it define you. But if your priority is growth, then failure can be studied. It can reveal a hole in your preparation, a weakness in your mindset, a limit in your current endurance, or a pattern in your behavior that needs to be addressed. This is where his approach becomes deeply practical. The question after failure is not, how do I make sure I never feel bad again? The question is, what did this expose, and what is my next move? That shift sounds simple, but it changes everything. It turns shame into instruction. It turns disappointment into feedback. It turns a collapse into a curriculum. For many listeners, this may be one of the most valuable takeaways from the book. Progress is rarely linear. You will have days when you quit too early, react badly, lose focus, underperform, or retreat into old habits. Goggins does not view those moments as proof that the whole project of transformation is fake. He views them as moments demanding greater honesty and deeper recommitment. The person who grows is not the one who never falls apart. It is the one who learns how to study the breakdown without surrendering to it. In this way, the book invites a more mature relationship with failure. Instead of fearing it as identity death, you begin to see it as one of the hardest, but most reliable teachers available. It would be easy to assume that Never Finished applies only to extreme performers, but the opposite is true. The examples may come from intense arenas, but the principles translate directly into ordinary life. Start with truth. Where do you make excuses most often? Maybe it is your health. Maybe it is your focus. Maybe it is the way you avoid difficult conversations. Maybe it is the pattern of beginning and then quitting the moment something becomes inconvenient. Goggins would say that growth starts when you stop decorating that pattern with language that makes it sound harmless. Name it clearly. Then create deliberate challenge. Not reckless challenge, but chosen difficulty. If your life is too padded by convenience, your mind will adapt to convenience. So introduce standards that require more from you. Wake up earlier. Train when you do not feel like it. Finish the work before entertainment. Stay with the problem longer. Sit in silence instead of escaping immediately into distraction. Return the call you are avoiding. Have the conversation you keep postponing. These are not dramatic acts by the standards of endurance sports, but they are profound acts of self-formation. The next principle is repetition. Goggins's philosophy only makes sense when practiced repeatedly. A single hard day can inspire you, but it cannot transform you. The deeper change comes when difficult action becomes part of your identity rather than an occasional burst of enthusiasm. Then there is reflection. The mental lab requires review. What triggered you today? Where did you negotiate with yourself? Where did you hold the line? What did you learn about your mind under pressure? Without this reflection, effort stays random. With it, effort becomes training. Finally, understand that the point is not punishment. The point is freedom. The more you strengthen your ability to function under discomfort, the less your life is ruled by mood, fear, and avoidance. You become more available to your own potential. You become less manipulated by the desire to stay comfortable at all costs. That is what makes the philosophy useful. It is not only about becoming tougher in the abstract. It is about reclaiming authority over your habits, reactions, and choices. Beneath the language of toughness, Never Finished also speaks to a deeper human need, the need for agency. Many people read Goggins only as a voice of intensity, but one reason his message resonates is that it offers an answer to helplessness. The book does not say that pain is unreal, or that trauma, humiliation, or disadvantage do not matter. It says that they do not have to remain the final authority over who you become. That is a different claim. Goggins is interested in what happens when a person stops organizing their life around what has happened to them and starts organizing it around what they are willing to build now. This is not denial of the past. It is a refusal to hand the future over to it. For listeners who are not drawn to extreme athletic achievement, this may be the most meaningful layer of the book. The challenge is not to imitate David Goggins' exact path. The challenge is to apply the principle of self-authorship. Can you become less defined by old narratives? Can you stop treating your lowest moments as a permanent identity? Can you build habits strong enough to carry you beyond familiar forms of fear? The book insists that much of human suffering is intensified by learned smallness. People adapt to low expectations, to emotional fragility, to inconsistent effort, to private self-contempt. Then they call that adaptation realism. Goggins wants to break that pattern. He believes there is dignity in demanding more from yourself, not because your worth depends on achievement, but because your life becomes larger when you stop worshiping your limitations. That is why the book can feel fierce and strangely hopeful at the same time. Its hope is not sentimental. It is built on the belief that human beings can be remade through disciplined action, honest self-study, and a willingness to endure the friction of change. The lasting power of Never Finished comes from the way it redefines what progress means. Progress is not the end of struggle. It is a stronger way of meeting struggle. Progress is not reaching a point where fear disappears, pain disappears, doubt disappears, and effort becomes effortless. Progress is becoming the kind of person who can carry those realities without surrendering to them. That is why the title matters so much. Never Finished means there is no final version of you that is beyond discipline, beyond testing, beyond honesty, beyond growth. There is always another ceiling, another layer of weakness to expose, another standard to embody, another season that will ask more of you than the last one did. Some people may hear that and feel exhausted, but there is another way to hear it. If you are never finished, then you are never trapped in your current form. You are not sentenced to remain exactly as you are. Your inconsistency is not your final name. Your fear is not your final truth. Your comfort addiction is not your final identity. There is still work to do, and because there is still work to do, there is still room to become. Goggins leaves the listener with a demanding but liberating vision. Tell yourself the truth. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Use hardship as training. Build confidence from evidence. Treat failure as instruction. Raise your standard and then live it, especially when no one is watching. And when you reach a level that once seemed impossible, do not turn it into a place to sleep. Turn it into the next starting line. That is the spirit of this book. Not self-hatred, not endless punishment, but relentless evolution. The work is difficult. The path is lonely at times. The demands are real. Yet the promise is powerful. There is more in you than comfort has allowed you to discover. And if you are willing to enter the war within and keep going long after the mind asks you to stop, you may find that what you thought was your limit was only the edge of your introduction.